Welcome back. Today we're going to do an in-depth garden tour, and there's a lot of interesting things going on here right now. I've been doing some experiments, and while a lot of them have been working out really well, some have been a big failure. So much so that I'm changing my strategy here next week and even making some big changes to my plans for my future gardens. And like always, some things are growing really well, like record-breaking well, and some things are doing quite awful. And if you're new here, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. My name is Katie, and I'm a Zone 3/Zone 4 gardener here in the North Woods of Minnesota. So let's go ahead and dive in, and I'll show you what's going on in here. So let's give you a quick overview here, especially if you're new here. So my garden is about 25 feet long and 52 feet wide. So that gives us about 1,300 square feet. Hi guys. And the way I currently have it set up, which I'll talk to you about later on in the tour, is my beds are 3 feet wide. I have 1 foot wide walking paths, and a new thing that I implemented this year is adding wood chips for my walking paths. And for fencing, I love to use electric poultry netting. Not only does it keep these guys from coming in and eating all of my goodies, but it also does a really great job keeping all the deer out. We have a ton of deer out here, the rabbits, raccoons, you name it. So love this fencing. I'll link it in the description if you're interested. Okay, let's start the tour. Okay, as I make my way back over here, I just want to ask you guys' forgiveness. It is a little messy because if you watched my garlic harvesting video, you probably remember that I royally threw out my back last week, and I'm just starting to feel better. So some things have been neglected a little bit. So this is going to be a real life garden tour. You can just see it as it is. And you'll probably be able to see how nice all my mulching that I spent so much time doing this spring is really paying off. I've also harvested a lot of things since we did our last tour in June. So I have some empty spots. So we're going to talk through what I'm going to be planting there, what seeds I've already started, and just kind of that next phase of succession, which is a little tricky with the short growing season that we have. So to begin, this section of my garden are largely my brassicas. So you can kind of see from a distance, we have some cabbages and broccoli, etc. And oh my goodness, these are by far the biggest cabbages I have ever grown. These are about 4 feet wide. They got so large that they busted way into the walking path and actually started to hit the electric fence, so I had to snap some of the bottom leaves off. But here you can just see this cabbage head, and I have big hands. It's just a monster. So I need to probably harvest this pretty soon, but I kind of just want to let it go and see how big it'll get. But I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cabbage heads. So we're going to be eating a lot of sauerkraut and coleslaw and all the things. Other things that you're really going to be noticing throughout my garden are a lot of flowers, and that is my secret sauce. So here we have marigolds. These are nasturtiums. Nasturtiums are new to me. This is something that I am growing for the first time, and I have mixed feelings. I'll show you as we go along. And then as we go over here, you'll notice that we have some empty spots. I'm trying to even remember what was here. I want to say these were my pak choi and like Asian greens. So those have since bolted or have been eaten and are out. So what's going to be placed here is I started some little broccoli plants, and they are ready to get in the garden. Now that I'm feeling better, I think this week I'll definitely be able to get them in. So that's going to be my fall harvest broccoli. And then these are my very sad calendula. These are my other companion planting flowers that I love to use. But something interesting is going on here that I haven't really noticed before, and if anyone has ideas, please let me know. But typically your blooms should look like this. And I've always had good luck growing calendula, but as the weeks go on, I keep getting these. These are not very good blooms. These are just trash. And these aren't flowers that have gone to seed. Those look a little bit different. That looks like this one's starting to go to seed. So those I deadhead so that it will continue blooming, but I'm not sure what's going on here. And it makes me sad. So if anyone has ideas, I will gladly take it. And then over here we have more and more monster cabbages. Here's another bare spot I'm probably going to plug in. I have some new cabbages, so probably plug those in, or more broccoli. I also have some baby kohlrabis. So anything in the mix, I'll toss in here. These are 3 more marigolds. I found that 3 is a good spacing for me on these 3-foot wide beds. And then we've made it to our sea of broccoli. I had an incredible harvest with massive broccoli heads, and I always leave my plants for the most part. I might remove a couple here and there if I really need the space, but I'll show you why I leave them in place, because you can see already we are starting to get little side shoots. So it will keep producing. It won't grow another large head, but these little side shoots are awesome. And so you can just go along and pop them off, and this is great. So you can chop it up, cook it up, freeze it, whatever you'd like to do. So love that about broccoli. It'll just keep on producing. We love broccoli around here. So I have a total of 18 plants. So I have 6 here. These guys are all spaced 18 inches apart. There's another 6 there, spaced 18 inches apart, and there's another 6 over there. So they're doing well, and that's been doing a whole lot better than last year. Last year I hardly got any side shoots, so it's kind of a weird year. This year is going a lot better. And you can see for the weed situation, we are doing pretty darn good using this organic straw as mulch around my plants, and then the wood chips on the walking paths. As I've said, I've done very little out here in the last week, and we've had good sun, and it just rained last night, so you can see the plants are nice and wet, so ideal conditions for weed growth. And this is so paying off, putting in the work, where now I really don't have to do much except for harvest, which is cool. Next up are the Brussels sprouts. So these I do cage because they get quite tall. They'll probably get about here, and the Brussels sprouts are the slow growers. I probably won't harvest this until after it's frozen, so sometime in late September, maybe early October. So you can see we're just starting to get some Brussels development, so we still have a ways to go on that. And the good news is with the Brassica family, once it starts to get some light frost, it improves the flavor. So even though it seems like it matures really late, it actually works out really well. And there's really not much that I do for it throughout the season, except for I do go through and pull off any dead leaves that aren't really contributing to the plant anymore, and just toss it over there. The chickens like to pick at it. Over here, I have 2 more Brussels sprouts plants, so 4 seems to be good. It's just Ryan and I. We don't have a big family to feed, so that works well. Go past the next patch of broccoli. You can see more little side shoots starting to pop here. And then here we have a bunch more nasturtiums. Now this is one of my mistakes. Since it's my first year growing nasturtiums, I wasn't really sure what to expect. And typically for like the marigolds here or my calendula, I've always done 3 wide for a 3-foot wide bed, and that's worked well. I tried to do 3 wide with the nasturtiums. Oh man, these guys are huge. So, I mean, this one is pouring way over into the next bed, and it's really, you can't even see where my walking path should be, right? Yeah, so it's kind of becoming an issue, but they are beautiful, and the flowers are edible and delicious. I'm trying to pick one out here so you can see it. And look how beautiful those flowers are. They are delicious. We've really enjoyed eating these. Not to mention these are just great for drawing in beneficial insects and repelling those pests. And here I have another gap, which looks like a gap, but it's actually a garden failure. This is my worst ever eggplant. Here's the second one. They just look awful. I think what happened is we just had a really cool and rainy spring. And if you know anything about growing eggplant, they like heat. They do not tolerate cold at all. So I don't know. I'll leave it for a little bit longer, and I don't know. I'll probably end up pulling them out because I'm just worthless at this point, and put more of the things that are working well, like at my next round of cabbages and kohlrabi and broccoli and that type of a thing. So if there's anything I learned about gardening, don't lose your mind about things that aren't growing well, and just focus on the things that you enjoy and the things that do well in your space and with your climate. And then we have another mad mess of nasturtiums. I mean, some of these are just ridiculous. This is all one plant, this whole thing that's just spilling all the way around. I had no idea they were gonna get so massive, so that was a big fail on my part. And everything I feel like looks a little bit trashed. We got a lot of rain last night, so Probably wasn't the best day for a garden tour, but we are getting it done. And this is my walking path. As you can see, it's getting hard to manage. So let's go ahead and talk about my biggest garden regret. So I am a greedy gardener. I am someone who wants to get the max amount of food out of the smallest space possible. And so with that, I decided to go with pretty narrow walking rows, 1 foot, which I've actually been using for almost 10 years. So I used 1 foot walking rows at our first homestead, and that worked great because I had poor quality, almost beach sand soil. So it was just chronically dry and low on nutrients. And so the plants never really got that big. And then here last year we had a drought and it was a first year garden, and so it wasn't fully optimized. And so the plants did pretty good, but this year, oh my goodness, I'm starting to realize now that I actually have good quality soil, or it's getting there, I've been doing a lot of work to improve it, the plants are booming. So I'm definitely gonna rethink how many plants I'm putting in each row for the next round, because it's just hard to work in here and I'm breaking things and stepping on things. And once I put in my new garden at our forever homestead further back on our property, I think I'll do 18-inch walking rows, maybe even 2 feet. That hurts me a little bit because that's such a loss of growing space, but this is not workable. Here you can see I was smart enough to just do 2 nasturtiums, and even with that, we are way spilling out over to our potatoes. So maybe just 1 nasturtium next year. Next up is the celery. Celery can be kind of fickle to grow, but I think we're doing okay. Definitely not the biggest stems that I've ever grown, but they sure are delicious. And my favorite way to preserve celery is I've been freeze drying it, chopped up, and then it's really easy to throw into soups and stews and stock bases, whatever you need. So even if they're tiny, they'll still pack a punch. And then next up, let me try and find a way to get through here, are my potatoes. So these are my purple fingerling potatoes that I'm so excited. Oh, looks like we have a big weed. Ugh. Let's get this guy fully out of there. So it's looking sad, but that's okay. This is what we want and what we're expecting. So it's just starting to die back, which means the potatoes are growing and it's diverting its energy into those tubers, and we're gonna leave those guys in the ground until these have completely died back and look super pathetic. So it'll probably be another month until we harvest potatoes. I like to wait until it's a little cooler. That way they'll do better in storage as well. The shop is warm. That is where I'm gonna be storing my potatoes. So I'm gonna keep these guys down in the earth until I have a cool spot to store them. And then up here we have more companion planting flowers. These guys are at least behaving well. We have a nasturtium here, a calendula that actually has blooms, and then another nasturtium here that isn't totally taking over. So good job, guys. And then next is a surprising success. So if you remember in my June garden tour, I was so not impressed with my store-bought zucchini plant because my seeds were bad. I couldn't get them to germinate. So I just panic bought this from the store and it looked awful, but look at that. We have completely come back. We're getting good growth. Lots of zucchinis coming in, and I haven't even noticed, knock on wood, any signs of the squash vine borer. And that is probably one of the worst pests out there in my opinion, and I've definitely lost a lot of squash plants over it. And so that is why you're seeing so many of my companion planting flowers all around this zucchini plant. I am waging war against the squash vine borer, and so far so good. It is paying off. All right, next up, we already talked about these broccoli plants, so let's go ahead and move over another very sad calendula patch. I don't know what's going on, but look at this kale, guys. The kale is just booming. I absolutely love it. This is a big staple for us. It's something that grows well. It doesn't bolt in the heat. It tolerates the cool weather well into below freezing temperatures. So I have 2 different varieties here. This one isn't thriving quite as well. I think it's called Black Magic Kale. One actually completely died. I had to pull it out, but these 5 are hanging in there, but you can just see the size difference. This one is just really growing out to be the winner. And honestly, we prefer to eat this one more anyways. And I found that this one is more resistant to that pesky cabbage worm. And so, I don't know, I'm thinking next year I might just do this because this is plenty of kale. For the two of us, this is fine. I really don't need these. So I think I might scratch this chunk next year and do something else instead. But 2 takeaway points about this patch is A, you're gonna notice all my brassicas are together. I'm all about garden rotation and keeping like families together. So all my brassicas are here together, and not to toot my own horn, but they are looking fantastic, meaning I'm not getting any pest damage at all. None of the cabbage worm, and I have sprayed absolutely nothing. 0 chemicals, even organic stuff, nothing. All I've done is the companion planting, heavy companion planting. I mean, they're just kind of everywhere with the marigolds, calendula, and the nasturtiums, and it's really done a great job to protect my plants. So highly recommend doing that. So next up is my onion patch, and this has been a little bit of an experiment this year, but so far so good. So what I've done differently is I did a closer spacing. So I typically do my bulbs every 6 inches, but I did a 4-inch spacing this year. Like, let's see if we can, as I mentioned earlier, I am a greedy gardener. Let's see if we can squeeze even more in there. And we're finally starting to get bulbs. They were looking pretty wimpy last month, but I think we're doing okay, and I don't think the growth is stunted. We're getting plenty of bulbs along the way. I need to do some weeding in here. I feel like the onion and garlic patch are just the most annoying to weed, so I don't get in there that much. But to be honest, hey, with the organic straw, it's really not bad. And here you can see with the wood chips too, not much is coming through. I mean, we have a little weed here, a little bit there, but loving this mulch. So these guys still need some time to crank along. We'll know that they are ready to harvest when the tops have bent and flopped over. Right now our greens are really strong and upright. We still have some growth to do. So probably next month sometime we'll be able to start harvesting onions. And you might notice that they are super close too. So I like to squeeze things in. I like to do it in a grid pattern. You'll often see people doing them in rows, and no, I just do 4-inch spacing or 6-inch spacing. We'll see what my final decision is at the end for the whole block. And at least with the 6-inch spacing, that's always worked really well for me. We'll see how the 4-inch spacing ends up. And then here at the end, I'm growing some shallots, and these guys are looking good. I mean, that's pretty big for shallots. You can see my hand next to it. So hey, that'll probably be ready before long. More kind of so-so calendula. These at least have some blooms on them. I love calendula not only because they're a great companion planting flower, but these blooms are highly medicinal. These are so prized in basically any type of skincare, also helping with eczema, diaper rash, itches, rashes, you name it. Love these. So I dehydrate a bunch of them, and then I infuse oils with it, and then I use the oils to make salves and body butter and all the things. Now we've made it to one of my pepper patches that's part of an experiment. These ones I did mulch because you guys know I love mulch, but peppers like hot weather, and mulch I found does decrease the soil temperature by about 6 degrees. So I'm kind of giving it a whirl where, yeah, there's some benefits to mulching just for soil quality and moisture retention and a weed barrier, but is that enough of a benefit to compensate for the decrease in temperature? Especially in Minnesota, we need every degree we can get when it comes to peppers. Overall, I'm pretty darn happy with it. We have some good bell pepper development. These guys are Carmen peppers. It's gonna be a ways until they turn red, but I like the size that I'm getting. Some are super wimpy. I think you just get duds sometimes, so that one's a little SOL. These are my Corno de Toro peppers. So these are pretty good. They're just kind of your run-of-the-mill peppers. You can use them for just about anything. They're not super spicy. So yeah, we'll see. We're definitely not ready or ripe to pick yet, but hopefully in August, we'll be ready to go. We have more marigolds here, which are looking awesome. Loving the marigolds. They just maintain a good shape. They're dependable, they're pretty, they work well. So marigolds, man, they are winning me over time and time again. Unlike, I have a love-hate relationship with chamomile. So this is a big old patch of chamomile, which was perky and beautiful and lovely, and I think we're kind of at the end of its life cycle here. It's been smashed by the rain a bunch, so now weeds are coming through the middle. A lot of the blooms are spent. This guy's been zapped by the electric fence. So, and then all the blooms are closed right now because it's been rainy and cold and cloudy this morning. So I think my plan for this chunk on a sunny day, I think it's supposed to be sunny in a few days, I'll come out, harvest whatever blooms I have left that are open and perky, and then I'm just going to tear all this out and start fresh. Now this has been the largest change from our last garden tour. The corn patch has really exploded, and what I like to do are a few things here. So I like to do 2 rows of corn for each of my 3-foot wide beds, and you want to make sure that you're planting it in blocks for adequate pollination. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6. So I have 6 rows here, and it's nearly the entire length of my garden, minus these companion planting flowers up front, which, look at these, we finally have some good blooms over here at least. But I mean, look, mixed in, we still have all these weird ones. But in the middle of my patch, I kind of do a 3 sisters method without the 3rd sister. I don't grow pole beans personally, I prefer bush beans, and so I like to run my squash vines right in the middle. Here you can see there is a gap here, so I did not plant corn in this middle section, and it works awesome, absolutely awesome. So this is mostly butternut squash in here. I have 8 butternut squash plants, I believe, and then 1 Cinderella pumpkin, and then the vines just go crazy. They're just running down and through here, and that's okay because corn is a low maintenance plant. I don't need to get in here. It's okay if it's complete chaos, and they really benefit each other. So all these vines are providing a living mulch for the corn, and then the corn protects the vines. While it doesn't come into play right now, in fact, sometimes I worry that the corn is shading the squash too much, but I've never had an issue. I always have my squash ripen in time for the most part, unless we have an unseasonably or early cold snap. But what the corn does to protect the squash is that if we do have a cold snap, it really helps kind of keep the frost off the leaves of the squash plant, and so much so that I'll notice I'll come out and everything under here is protected, but anything that's trailing out will be sad and toast. So it really does help, especially if you have a short growing season like I do, to run the squash underneath the corn. And as far as the squash development so far, let me try and get down in here. So we have some little baby squash, definitely not ready to harvest yet, but they are starting. Let's see if we can find a pumpkin. Here's another little baby squash in there. I don't know, it's a complete jungle. I know I've seen baby pumpkins, I just can't find them right now. So it'll be more apparent when they turn bright orange. I do try and keep an eye on these vines. You can see this one's kind of running straight to the fence, so just kind of lift it up and turn it back around. You stay in there with your friends. One thing you'll notice that I'm super relieved about is there's no mildew issues. So we have had record-breaking rain pretty much every single day. So much so that I've only had to water my garden twice all season, and so far so good. I haven't noticed any mildew issues, and I'll show you what's going on with my tomatoes. Largely good, but there's a little few things going on over there. Oh, let's get you in there too. Turn you back around. And here is what is left of my garlic patch. If you missed my garlic harvesting video, definitely check that out. That one was a hoot. Ryan helped me harvest since my back was so bad. So these are the remaining bulbs that weren't quite ready to harvest, and they're getting really close now. In fact, they're probably ready. So what I'm looking for is 2 dead leaves, maybe even a 3rd. So I think we're about ready to pull those out. Unfortunately, it just rained, so if I tried to pull these out now, they would just be stuck in the mud and just be a mess. So I'm gonna have to wait till later this week to pull these guys out. But then once I do that, that is gonna give me an opportunity to do something entirely new for this whole bed. So that's a decent amount of planting space. So it is July 22nd, and our first expected frost date, I can't remember the exact date, but it's mid-September. So we have about 2 months to go, so that's not a ton of time ton of turnaround time for growing, like throwing tomatoes in there or something like that. So I think what I'm gonna do is more bush beans, so I can do a second round of that. I might do some overflow of those broccoli and cabbages if I can't find enough room over in the brassica patch. It's probably a little too early to do things like radishes. They like the cooler temps and they just don't need that much time. So I'll take a little bit of cleanup. There's some weeds in here and I'll need to get this organic straw out of there, at least pushed out of the way of the planting rows, since I'll be direct seeding the bush beans. I think I have some leftover compost, so I'll want to put some compost down too, just to replace some of the nutrients. Now this looks like a hardy vine. I bet this is, yay! We found my pumpkins! So still itty bitty. I think there's, oh good, there's another one here. So we still have a ways to go. Hopefully they'll mature in time. Oh, this one's not looking so good. So let's pull this one off so that it doesn't waste its energy on that guy. So goodbye. All right, so we've made it to the end of the garlic patch, ends here, and next up is the dill patch, and this is just so beautiful. I love dill. I love the seed heads for canning and pickling, and I love to freeze dry the greens, and I can use that for seasoning all year long, but it's largely on its last leg. The greens are mostly gone. We're definitely into seed head production time, so we have a little bit of life left to these, but I'll be pulling those before long. I do like to leave some and let the seed heads develop and drop the seeds so that I'll have a dill patch next year. So it'll self-seed, which is really cool. And once we go back to the house, you'll see my next round of dill. So I like to do succession sowing so that I still have more dill next month, because these guys are toward the end and pickle season has just started. And then down below we have a little bit more successful and less pathetic chamomile patch. So these guys are still looking good. Oh, I wish you guys could smell it. It just smells so good. I dehydrate quite a few of these and I just love them for a tea. They're just so soothing, a great bedtime tea. It also helps with stomach aches. Just love this stuff. And it's a great companion plant. It'll bring in your beneficial pollinators and it just looks so pretty in the garden. And oh, the carrot patch. If you guys have been watching along with my garden journey for a while, you know that this has been a struggle, but I think we're finally getting somewhere. I've had to reseed chunks 3 different times because I had issues with germination, and then I buried it too deeply in the mulch, so they died, and it's just been one thing after another. I feel like carrots are one of those things that are so simple yet so challenging all at the same time. Let's go ahead and see how one of these are looking. Carrots are a big crop for us, so I really hope it works out. But with this heavy clay soil, oh, it's so hard to harvest. Our last homestead had beach sand and it was so easy. Everything just popped out. On the flip side, the nutrients were just terrible. Everything was dry. So I think I'd still take clay over sand any day. So yeah, we're looking okay. Edible for sure, but not monster carrots yet. So we'll take it. And this is this entire row. So I did 3 rows wide, and I think that was good. I didn't overdo it. I debated doing 4, and I think that would have followed suit with the madness that I did over there. I think that they would have grown fine doing 4 rows wide. I don't think it would have impeded their growth, but oh my gosh, we would just be spilling over. And again, I would not have walking paths. So stick with the plan, 3 rows. Remind me next year when I'm tempted to do 4. And then over here are more potatoes. So these are kind of my staple potatoes, while over there were my purple fingerling potatoes that I'm so excited about. But these guys are the red chieftain potato. So these I've been growing since the very beginning. I grow them every year. I love them. They're delicious. They store well, and they're just easy to grow. So these guys are also starting to die back a little bit, and yeah, maybe a month or so, hopefully maybe closer in September. That way the temps are a little bit cooler. We'll be ready to harvest. And this year I did something a little bit different. I did my hilling with extra deep layer of organic straw instead of hilling up with soil. So typically how potatoes work is you plant them, and then when the greens come up and are about a foot tall, then you bring the soil up to kind of bury the tubers even deeper so they stay cool away from the sunlight. But I really didn't want to do that anymore now that I'm using wood chips on the walking paths, because it's just going to get messy and hard to move soil around. So did the organic straw, and I mean, so far so good, but it's hard to tell until you really dig up those potatoes, so we'll see. Okay, so let's move on to my nightmare over here. First of all, we have more of the chamomile here that's not as bad as that first patch, but we're just kind of flopping over and getting to the end of the life cycle. So I think wait till a sunny day for these to perk up and flower up, harvest it, pull them out. What have I done here? Oh my guys, like I don't even know how I'm gonna get in there and harvest my green beans. So these are my bush beans, which I absolutely love. This is a huge staple for us. We love to eat green beans. I love to can dilly beans. I also freeze dry the beans. I also freeze the beans. So these are just an absolute staple that get us through the winter. And we are so close to being able to harvest. So we have our little beans there. So really in a couple days, we'll be ready to go. But I was greedy and I decided to do 4 rows of bush beans here. And now, I mean, they're just blowing into the potatoes and we're blowing into the tomatoes, and I'm really regretting that. So note to self, 3 rows and probably wider walking paths with the next garden for sure. To add insult to injury, green beans are one of those plants that are really irritating to your skin to harvest. My forearms always get super rashy. So yeah, that's gonna be fun. Okay, here's my next experiment, but first let's look at my good companion planting flowers that are behaving and looking really great. Love these little marigolds, rock stars. So this is my next experiment. We have more bell peppers, or not bell peppers, different types of peppers. So these are my unmulched section, which I did go through and weed because it was embarrassing how many weeds were here. So this part I did clean up before garden tour, and that just goes to show how amazing that mulch is for weed control, because this was just covered. Like you couldn't even see the soil. There were so many weeds, it was awful. But warmer soil temp. So let's see how everyone is doing. Now, unfortunately, I didn't do a super great scientific test in that these are different types of peppers than what I have over there that are mulched. But I have a third pepper experiment, which I'll show you toward the house, that kind of evens it out. So bear with me. So here we have, these are all poblanos. So we're getting there. These are getting pretty close to being ready to be harvested, especially over here. These guys are looking really good. So I'm happy with how these are looking. This is my pride and joy. I really hope it works out. These are my Scotch bonnets. You can see these are itty bitty little baby peppers there. I have a second one here and a third one here. Ooh, look at these. We might actually do it. Now these are gonna have to turn orange, so we're far from being ripe, but we might do it. I absolutely fell in love with Scotch bonnets when we went to a family wedding in Jamaica, and I love hot sauce and make my own fermented hot sauce. And after I tried Scotch bonnets, I was like, oh my gosh, I can never go back. I have to have Scotch bonnets in my hot sauce. So fingers crossed, we'll see if we can do it. So I have habanero on this tag, and I'm just now noticing that, oh, I just broke it off too. Ah, double fail. So that is not a habanero. I don't even know what that is. Doesn't look like a poblano. Doesn't really look like a bell pepper. I don't know. Well, that's a fail. Okay, I'll come back for that later. Next up are the cayennes. So cayennes do really well in Minnesota. They tolerate our weather. They don't need a long season. You can see I already have my first red one. These guys are my bread and butter of my hot sauce. They're kind of the bulk of what I do. You can see I already have another one there. So we're doing good. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cayenne plants. And then these are my jalapenos, which are also looking good. Next we have our sea of tomatoes. So I have some surprising things going on here and some experiments that I've been doing. So up until this year, I have always grown Plum Regals for my paste tomatoes or my canning tomatoes. So you can see how they're doing. I mean, puts on lots of fruit. I don't really like how this one is on the ground, but I'll keep an eye on it and see how it's doing. But we're doing good. It's loading up and they're gorgeous tomatoes. I canned so many tomato things last year, but I was like, I don't know, I should experiment with a second kind of paste tomato and see if this really is the best or if it can get better. And look at this. So this is an Amish paste tomato. And I already have red tomatoes already. I can't believe it. And you can see over here, this one is red already. So I don't know, I kind of have mixed reviews because you're gonna see a little bit of blight on these Amish paste tomatoes. Not bad, so I need to get through here and prune all this out before it starts to spread. I think part of it is just the habitat of this plant. It's really droopy. Like the leaves just go straight down, and that is just a recipe for disaster for blight. I think the mulching helps because the way blight happens is it rains and then soil splashes up on the leaves. So I'm not having much of that, but obviously some blight is happening. Where on the flip side, we're back to the Plum Regal, there's absolutely no blight. We are looking awesome, and you can see that the leaves are much more upright and perky. So I don't know, I'm not making my judgment call until the very end. I need to do a taste test. I'm curious how they're going to produce throughout the whole season. And overall, here you can see, here's the Amish paste. Again, more blight again. So I don't know, jury's still out on the tomato experiment. The other thing that is proving to be a challenge already is height with the tomato cages. I love tomato cages, they're just so easy. I already have them. I don't have to create this elaborate like tie system and everything, but the difference between these two again is the Plum Regal is a determinate tomato, so it's not gonna grow like crazy, where the Amish paste tomato is an indeterminate. So you can see already we are way up here. This is probably, well, I'm 5'7", and this is about as tall as me already. And so, oh my, we're already starting to flop around and get way too tall. So I either need to get up here and just start pruning off these leaders so it doesn't get too massive and starts basically breaking and falling over. And you can see over here, yeah, super tall as well. We're really getting up there. So I kind of like the controlled size of the determinate Plum Regal. And here again is the Amish paste tomato, just a little bit more messy. And I like neat. So this is a new one for me. This is my one slicer. I don't grow that many slicer tomatoes. We do mostly tomato processing around here, but I do like to have at least one slicer. And look at how beautiful this is gonna be. We're still a ways until it's ripe, but this is the pink Boer tomato. This is a new one to me. Ooh, wait, look. So we're starting to get some color to them. So these are gonna be fun. Pretty excited about it. No blight noticed on these ones either. So it's really just these Amish paste tomatoes that have me a little bit worried. But again, we've had record-breaking rain. So if this is all that I'm getting after all of that, I think I'm doing okay, but definitely need to get in and prune all this off. And then lastly for the tomatoes, I have two more grape tomatoes, and I'm trying to remember the variety. I'll put it on the screen, but I grew them last year and they did awesome. They didn't split, they were delicious, they preserved really well, so I I freeze dried a lot of them, and then they were great to just throw into quiche and soups, and they're even great croutons on salads. But I'll give you a look at how they look. Let's see if we have some red ones. I just picked a bunch the other day. There we go. So yeah, they're coming in pretty well. That one's not super red yet, but yeah, they're just a great size, great flavor, love it, and no blight at all on these. And these even have some low leaves that shamedly are still there. I need to prune off those lower leaves, but hey, we are looking pretty darn good. And then to cap off the tour on this back garden at least are my cucumbers. So this is also a new experiment that I've been doing a couple different ways. One is just how I have this set up. So I love to use cattle panel fencing for the cucumbers. I feel like it's a good height, it's good spacing, it's just really easy and expensive with just some T-posts, and we just secured it with zip ties. But last year I used this panel twice as long, so it's actually these two panels in one piece all the way down. But the problem with that is they got really tall and dense, and they were really shading the next row over. And so I decided to split it and do 2 shorter rows. And so far so good. I think we're doing all right. I have noticed that this side is doing a lot better than the other side. I don't know if it's because it prefers morning sun versus afternoon sun, which doesn't really make that much sense to me because cucumbers like heat, but we're doing good. So I've just been trying to remember to come in here and just kind of help them climb and keep everybody in line and going in the right direction. I haven't pruned anything off yet to reduce the density. I haven't noticed any disease issues. We're looking good so far. I probably will for things like this that are just trailing on the ground and there's really not much room to tuck it in under there. At some point I need to just cut my losses and get rid of those. I realized the other day I didn't really mulch over here, but it's so shaded anyways just from all of this that I don't know, not really getting much for weeds. So I don't know, I might mulch it with some straw, we'll see. Oh, I did pick cucumbers yesterday to make pickles, but it looks like I missed one. So one thing I should mention is the variety of pickles that I grow now are cucumbers. So we largely make pickles with these, and I used to grow slicers and pickling cucumbers, and then I realized that pickling cucumbers aren't only good for pickling, they're good for fresh eating too. So it's like, oh, I'll just grow pickling cucumbers that are good at everything. So I've since scratched the slicers and only grow these guys. And then over here has been a disappointment so far. This is my cucamelon, which I thought would be so cute and fun, something new to grow, but I don't know. I'm getting little blooms on here, and oh, I guess here, this is the first one I've ever seen, but it's so tiny. I don't know, is that, oh, wait. Maybe I do have a little bit of something. I don't know. Is that what it's supposed to look like? Is that it? Did I do it? It just doesn't seem super prolific. We'll see if I end up doing that again or not. Okay, now I want to show you a lot of my experiments that I have going on back by the house. So that's the big, what I call my back garden, where I have all my big stuff and the bulk of my production. But I do like to have some things close to the house, and it's set up a little bit different so I can do some testing and try some things out. All right, so I have 3 raised beds here, and then I do have some what I like to call my edible landscaping around the shop. So first let's go look at my pepper experiment. So this is a true scientific experiment where I have 1 of each variety that I've been growing over in the back garden here. So I'm doing no mulch and a raised bed. So both of those things are each adding a higher soil temp essentially. And I was really choosy about which ones I picked. I made sure at the time of planting that I picked an average size plant that was pretty comparable to the rest that were in the garden. So I'm hoping that I have a pretty good comparison. And as you may notice, these guys are really looking good, especially this one. This is my Scotch bonnet. Oh my goodness, this plant is like triple the size of my ones over there in the in-ground garden. However, the fruit isn't necessarily as large. So I don't know. We'll see what comes from that one. The poblano's looking good. I'd say pretty equivalent to what we saw out in the garden. The bell peppers are actually kind of looking pretty puny, but the greens are looking good. Cayennes are also looking good, but they're not red yet. These bell peppers are looking equivalent to what we saw out in the back garden. I'd say the jalapenos are probably looking better. So jury's still out on these. The plants overall are bigger. They look more vibrant to me, but the fruit, which is the ultimate important thing, not sure. We'll see. Over here, not much has changed from last time. This is my marshmallow plant. This is a really great medicinal plant that has kind of some good lubricating properties, which is great if you have a dry cough or anything like that. The roots are what you harvest for that. So, and you don't want to do it till year 2. So I'm just letting this guy hang out. This is my St. John's wort, which is now blooming. I guess that is an update from my last garden tour. So these are looking great. I'm noticing lots of bees buzzing around on here. So it's definitely drawing in the pollinators, which I love. But this is a great plant to make a tincture out of. So I use the blooms here, and it really just is a great mood booster in the winter time with those winter blues. It does have some interactions with certain medications, so make sure that you're talking with a herbalist or checking in with your provider before you start taking St. John's wort. Here is the strawberry patch, which is largely a June producing plant, so it's largely done for the year. I'm just kind of letting it hang out. And then here is my next experiment. You can see a lot of it is blank, which we'll talk about in a minute. But here is my basil patch. This guy is looking pretty good. We're definitely getting more and more of those little blooms in there. It's bolting, so I've been trying to get in there and kind of pinch those off to keep that leaf development going. Been making lots of pesto. I need to get in there and start freeze drying some of this. I haven't done it yet this year, so good reminder. I need to get in there and do some preserving before it's totally toast. Back here is my second dill patch. So I seeded that, I think last month sometime. So I think this guy is gonna come in just as my other dill patch is starting to retire. Behind that is green onions. Those guys are looking awesome. I also have some new little green onions coming in. So I love to do succession sowing so that I kind of always have it available. I still have my baby greens in here. They're not so baby anymore, and a lot of it has bolted. So a lot of these kind of lettuce varieties, they don't like the heat very well. And we did get in the 80s for a little bit. That was exciting. So anytime I'm seeing these, I just kind of pull these out and let the ones that haven't bolted thrive, which is largely just the kale that's left. So that's okay. It's kind of nice to be able to harvest some kale right by the cabin if I need to grab something quick. You can see these lettuces. They have bolted as well. So bolted lettuce, the reason why you don't want to eat it is it gets pretty bitter. And so it's just not very tasty anymore. But if you want, you can let it keep going and then harvest the seeds. Okay, experiment time. If you remember from my last garden tour in June, this is where I had my root vegetables. So my turnips and my rutabagas and my, what are they called? Daikon radish, and they were all just destroyed by the root maggots, which is such a bummer because that is such a important crop for us as far as self-sufficiency goes. At least the turnips and the rutabagas, they store incredibly well, like months and months and months in the fridge. And just, I had to pull it all out. It was all trash. And so what I'm gonna do are two things. Step one was starting them from seed in the house. So typically, this is a rutabaga here. The turnips are still in the house. They're still small because they need less time. The rutabagas need more time. So I started them a while ago. But I typically direct seed these since they're a root crop, but I wanted to play to win. So I want them to be strong and vibrant and more resistant to pests when they go into the garden. So I think I'm gonna definitely give these guys a try. I'm gonna plant them this week, I think, get them in the garden. And then the other thing I'm gonna do is do a floating row cover, like insect netting, to hopefully keep those root maggots out. There's a chance that they're still in the soil, but I dug all that stuff out pretty much immediately after that video, which was about a month ago. So I'm hoping that their life cycle has completed itself. There's no more food there and they flew out. So fingers crossed that the hardy, established, mature plants plus the insect netting will help me survive this. We'll see. Okay, so let's finish out the tour over here. So these are my problem plants, aka invasives. So we have mint here, this is lemon balm, and this is oregano. And containers are so hard. They are just so hard. I fail every time, and we've had a ton of rain, so they've actually had the best treatment that they've ever gotten from me in a container. And I just feel like anytime a plant is grown away from the soil microbiome and the bugs down here and just the goodness of the earth and just good modulating temperature, it just doesn't go as well. These guys are just kind of sad. The mint is looking halfway decent. I'm happy with this, but I don't know, it's just not that great. So if you are container gardening, I'm proud of you. You know, if you're an apartment or something where you can't have a garden, that's awesome, but don't be discouraged. It is what it is. You're doing the best you can, and if and when you get to a point where you can do an in-ground garden, rest assured it will go better. All right, so this is something I added this past year. I have a video on putting this in for edible landscaping, which was super fun. Definitely check it out if you missed it. I'm all about growing food in every space you can. So don't waste your landscaping on boring bushes that aren't doing anything for you. My only exception are my great grandpa's irises. So I brought them with us on the move. So those guys get their own dedicated spot. But otherwise I have chives here that are doing well. And then here we have some blueberry bushes. Only this one has fruit on it, which is kind of weird, but whatever. These guys are thriving. Love using blueberry bushes as landscaping. I feel like they look great, and I like to mulch with pine needles. They're free. We have a lot of pine trees around here, and they're slightly acidic, and blueberries like acidity. They definitely seem to be enjoying it, and the blueberries are mighty fine as well. And then, oh, the rhubarb. The rhubarb is a very special plant to me. This has been passed down through my family for almost 150 years. It came over on the boat from Sweden, and it did amazing at our last homestead, but it's struggling here a little bit, and I think it's because of the heat. It can get really warm here because the sun beats down on the house and it kind of bounces in. Not as much of a breeze here, and I don't know. Rhubarb is one of those really hardy plants that actually only does well in the north. It needs a good winter. It doesn't like super high hot temps. So I think if I were to do this again, I would have put this further down here where it does get some shade, but this guy just got transplanted last spring. I don't want to move it around again, so it's good enough. She's hanging on. Maybe in a year or two I'll move it, especially once we move our homestead further back, once we finally, maybe someday, build our house. And then here is my little herb garden, which is doing pretty fair. The thyme is really starting to fill in. I transplanted this from my back garden this spring to free up some space in my back garden. And I love having herbs close to the house. It's really easy to just run out and grab stuff. And I did the wood chips here, and I actually just did stones and rocks that I found around our property. So this was all essentially free, which was awesome. There are some weeds in here every once in a while. I'll need to come in and do weeding here too, but not bad. Here is more rosemary. These guys are looking good. I am hopeful that maybe the rosemary will come back next spring because of this heat effect. Rosemary typically does not survive our Minnesota winters. It did when we used to live in Kansas City, and that was so nice. I had this huge, beautiful rosemary bush, but I'm hoping with the heat coming off the building in the winter, and then just this nice insulating section, I'll probably give it extra mulch this winter. I hope. We'll see if it'll come back. Oh, and then here's the disaster zone. So you can see the difference that mulching makes. I have not weeded over here, and then I haven't weeded over there either because I don't need to. It just makes such a big difference. And then, oh boy, yeah, I've definitely been neglecting this section. So this was lettuce, has definitely bolted. That guy's done. This guy's done. This one's seen better days. This lettuce surprisingly still looks halfway decent, but all this needs torn out. I didn't end up planting anything here. Just never really got around to it. But down here, I'm pretty happy with it. The cilantro has come up. We've eaten quite a bit of it already. I'm failing in my succession planting here though, because cilantro you want to reseed every few weeks so you have a continual harvest, and I have not done that. So this is a good reminder. Maybe that's what I'll do over here. I'll just do more cilantro. And then the sorrel I have not figured out. That's an edible green that I was so excited to try, and it just hasn't been thriving at all. It didn't like being in the pots in the house when I was starting seeds. I was thinking, well, maybe it just needs to get outside and it'll do better. Granted, there's all these weeds too, but I don't know. It's just, I'll call that a garden fail. And then down here, we are looking mighty fine. So we have parsley here, another parsley, and a third parsley. These guys are loving the spot, even though if we look above, it's actually pretty shady. We still have yet to take that broken birch tree down, which will improve the sunlight a little bit, but yeah, I don't know. These guys are doing just fine. So the parsley's enjoying it. Same with the sage. This one I transplanted from the back garden, and these are 2 new sage plants that I got this year, and everyone's just doing really good. And again, I haven't done any weeding. And you can see how awesome that wood chip mulch is doing compared to that. Well, that was really fun, and I can't wait until August. That is when the produce is really gonna start pouring in and we starting to go full on production mode. So make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on what's coming up. But I think overall we have a really good start. Really not much for pests minus those root maggots, just a little bit of blight on that one kind of tomato. So I think we're gonna have another great year, and I can't wait to see how much food we can pack away this winter. If you're new to gardening or if you want to start a garden, also don't miss out on my garden planning course. I have a comprehensive course that'll teach you everything you need to know to get started with gardening, and I do have a 10% off discount code. I'll put all of that in the description so you can check it out. As always, thank you so much for being here. I love taking you guys along on my gardening journey. I hope you're all having a fantastic week, and I'll catch you on my next video.